Okay, excellent. Well, welcome everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Safety and Transportation Committee. We're being audio and videotaped. The start of the meeting, I am joined by Councilors Block, Lipoff, Wright, Lucas, and Bixby. And we are going to head right into our first docket item. And that is 227-24, the semi-annual public auto inspections report. And I see that we are joined. Is it Sergeant Divine? Is that your title?
Captain.
It's
Captain.
Captain Divine now. I got promoted about a month and a half ago, so.
Oh, congratulations.
Missed all of you guys. A few years since I've been doing one of these again. I did my time as a lieutenant in OIC, and now I'm back as the captain of traffic. So some things don't change life.
Okay,
I'm
well,
back, so it's good to be back.
Congratulations and
Thank
welcome
you.
back. It's nice to have you with us tonight. We've also been joined by Councilor Downs, Vice Chair of the committee. Well, Captain, if you want to just go right ahead and tell us about the inspections and the auto licenses, that would be great.
You got it. Over the past few weeks, Sergeant Babcock has done an inspection of all the public autos. I'll start reading them off. American Truck and Equipment Sales Auto, Boston Cool Ride Limo, Don's Car Service, Ismo Limo Service, MHS Worldwide, Size Enterprises, Sato Trading, Valley Brothers Transportation, and AB Inc. have all passed their inspections for public auto. The Valley Brothers and the ABS passed a few months ago, and within the past 2 or 3 weeks, we inspected all the other public auto. So everyone's in good standing with us.
Okay, thank you so much. Do we have
You're welcome.
Comments or questions from any members of the committee?
I just want to compliment Captain Divine on his great background.
Okay. Do we have any comments or questions or a motion on this item?
I'll move what should we move? Approval? No, NAN, I think.
Oh, you move approval.
Approval.
We move approval? Okay,
Yes.
I'll move approval.
Okay, any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that's a unanimous vote. Captain, thank you again, and really nice to have you back with us. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to go on to our second and final item of the evening, which is 201-24. Councilors Grossman, Downs, and Laredo requesting a policy discussion review and possible action related to parking on street and in municipal lots. So we discussed this item once before and we held it. And during that discussion, we largely talked about how we wanted to proceed with brainstorming our ideas around parking policy and where we want to go from here. Oh, and I see we've also been joined by Councilor Greenberg. So the conclusion that I came away with from that meeting in terms of format is that we're going to keep it in committee, at least for now, for a variety of reasons. One, our docket has plenty of time and opportunity for us to dig into this work. Secondly, we are all elected representatives with members on the council from each ward who are represented here by the council. And after hearing from all of you and consulting with Vice Chair Downs as well as President Laredo, I feel that that's most appropriate at this time. I know that Councilor Downs had gotten started in putting together a little bit of a kind of a chart for us to try to organize the different ideas that we have heard over the many years that we've been discussing parking policy, to try to anchor where our thoughts as a committee are, to fill it out with further ideas and to examine the pros and cons of each one. I also heard through the grapevine that Councilor Block, you've been working on something similar. I don't know if that's accurate, but would love to invite you to tell us about that. And then Counselor Downs, if you're interested in putting what you've been sketching out up just as sort of a, working outline to anchor our discussion, I think that would be great. Counselor Block, why don't you tell us about what thinking and organization you've been doing?
I'm not sure I know what you're referring to, Chair Grossman, but I think at the last meeting I'd referred to some data regarding what different cities and towns had done with overnight parking requirements. And I don't have that handy, but as I recall, it's pretty diverse. The one thing I would say is that I'm sort of recalling from some of my calls to other cities and towns, it's moderately dense communities that have our kind of problem. I mean, we other places like Salem, Gloucester, Peabody, where there are residences who don't have off-street parking. A sufficient number of people don't have automatic access to off-street parking where this tends to get difficult. Other places where almost everybody has off-street parking, kind of, places like Linfield, they just don't have any debate about this. Whatever they have, and everybody follows it, and it's not any difficulty. So I think if we were going to look for examples of places we would want to study, it would probably be, these modest size cities or suburban areas. And I didn't really get any farther than that, but I'd be happy to do so either with other people or, as part of some assignment to kind of pool information.
Okay, I think it would be, if you're able to pull it together into one list, even something simple, I think that would be helpful. I think Counselor Downs, you had mentioned to me that you were aware that Counselor Block had been doing some work. So I'm not sure if that's what you were thinking of, or if there was something else.
That's what I heard from my neighbor at City Council when I handed John Oliver the chart that I had it's really a working document, and I shared it with John Oliver because he had wanted to work on a solution when he was a member of this committee. And I'd also given you a copy, and I'm happy to share with the rest of the committee, but it really comes down to, if I'm looking at solutions that are used in other cities, both here and across the country, as well as at, different programs that other cities use. And, we can talk about their merits, but I put together a few, what the different options are, what the different problems with them are, what the different opportunities are with each one, and we can debate those. But if we agree that the issue is that long-term car storage in different neighborhoods poses different issues, from not being able to identify abandoned cars easily to street sweeping, students being encouraged to bring extra cars, commuters leaving their cars with us, new apartments and condos that were built with paid on-site parking that is separate payment than rent or condo fees, then taking advantage of there being free space on the street or available space on the street, and the need for other uses for that on-street space, such as dining, bike lanes, parklets, real parks, getting larger trees and stormwater infrastructure or even play. So, yeah, and many other things we can use our streets for besides car storage. So if we agree that those are the issues writ large, I'm not going to go into, all the many ways that long-term cars, I mean, that I think is what the overnight parking ban is meant to address. Because we've agreed with DPW that if they say they can get the streets clear and that our current snow emergency ordinance works to deal with the problem of cars blocking plows, then we should not put that down as a reason to have the overnight parking ban in the winter. But if I may, I'll read out the handful really of possible solutions. One is a permit system. There are various flavors of that: residential, employee, student, temporary, overnight, and permits for multifamily versus permits for single family housing. And you can probably think of a few more. There are time limits. We have 2-hour, 12-hour. We have time limits targeted toward commuters, for instance, no parking from 7 to 9 a.m. or from 3 to 5 p.m. in order to discourage all day on-street parking by people who are going in and working normal working hours. New York does a street sweeping schedule. I know Northampton worked with that, which was, I believe in Northampton, it was monthly. Some streets have it weekly. New York does alternate side every other day, and they have very complicated signs up, and you have to move your car every other day. It makes car ownership just a little bit more inconvenient. There are meters, which can be physical meters or kiosks or just signs that direct you to use the pay-by-plate. And the overnight parking ban. The other thing that we've been doing, which is ongoing, is that when the streets are just too narrow for a trash truck or a bus or a turning truck that needs to access the street for some reason, a large vehicle, we are removing parking on one or both sides of the street, just saying you can't park on Rockwood in Upper Falls because it's 10 feet wide and there are no sidewalks. You can't park on some streets in, I believe it was Ward 3, where we just had that long discussion and showed that the buses and the fire trucks would be blocked if people parked in a certain way. And so we removed parking on part of the street to facilitate that. So I'm not sure that needs a new effort, but I thought I'd just throw that out there. And that's all I've got. Now, we may have other ideas.
Well, at one point when we were talking about different ideas and we were discussing how to go about this docket item with the law department, I recall the idea, well, I guess this goes under the overnight parking ban category of, a summer ban versus a winter ban, an all year ban versus no ban. So does that all go in the overnight parking ban?
That does. Yeah, I have overnight parking ban, the various flavors being all year, which Brookline and Needham have, or a winter ban. We could do a summer ban. Okay, it's seasonal, can be a different season than winter. But it's basically an overnight parking ban. And then you figure out the flavor that you think that would work best for Newton. I do in my chart, and then you guys can throw other things out at me, note that it solves our current overnight parking ban, or the all year overnight parking ban solves a number of the issues with long-term car storage. But as we've heard from many residents, it's inconvenient, it's inequitable. And Mr. Freudberg did me the favor of writing down all the reasons he had heard of, many of which come under different flavors of inconvenient and inequitable, people with disabilities, people who can't get down their driveways, or whatever. But he also noted it encourages more more driveways being built and more curb cuts being put in, which of course means that either lawn or trees get removed and we have more impervious surface just when we're trying to reduce that. And it removes a natural traffic calming device, which is on-street parking. And we may be able to think of other benefits of not restricting on-street parking in some ways. So I think I've talked enough. I would love to share this with people, but I'd love to first hear what folks, this is the spaghetti on the wall type of exercise where we think of other ways to regulate parking or define these various programs. And then we can move on to, then I can share it out with people, or we can talk about what we want to look at more in more depth.
Sure. So I appreciate that. And I'm just writing down some different notes as you were speaking and others are speaking. And just to be clear, if I wasn't, the goal here is really brainstorming, getting ideas out on the table, getting the key issues and concerns out on the table. We're not going to take any public comment tonight. We are going at some point to find appropriate opportunities to take public comment. We are not ready at this moment to do that. So when we are ready, we will make it clear in advance that we are going to take public comment and invite folks to do so. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I'd be interested in what Councillor Downs put together. I know when I used to live in Marlborough, I used to drive to Brighton and park my car for a week or two if I'm gone and just leave it on the street and take the T into the to the airport. What I grew up in Wisconsin, and a lot of places in Wisconsin that they do is parking on odd days. You park on the odd side of the street. On even days, you park on the even side. So that way the streets don't become a parking lot and they get towed, at night if you're parking on the wrong side, or you get ticketed, and it's easier to do it. You do need to put up signage. But it also, there's a lot of streets that we don't have no parking on one side that are very narrow to begin with anyways, and this would help in that, because otherwise if we allow parking on both sides, I think there'll be a lot more streets that we would need to ban parking on one side of the street.
So I'll add that as one that's sort of like the alternate side that New York has, but I'll add it in as an idea.
Mhm.
On the chart.
All set for now, Councillor Wright?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Block.
I would be very interested in knowing how many residences don't have off-street parking. just as a way of getting a handle on how big is this problem. I mean, I appreciate Councillor Downs reciting all of the different kind of rationales or issues that we're sort of talking about. But if everyone had off-street parking, this probably wouldn't be taking up our time. So how I mean, we had a request for, what was it, a special permit, I guess, on Edinburgh Street to allow parking basically on the front yard, which we voted down. So how many places are there like that? And has that been collected in the past, or in which case I've never seen it. And if it hasn't, how hard would it be to generate it?
I don't know the answer, Councillor Downs. I don't know if you do, but one sort of footnote I would give to that is one of the questions we also have to ask ourselves is, in counting that, if you've got one off-street space, is that sufficient? And some of the folks who I've heard from, including neighbors of mine who want to get rid of the overnight parking ban, have multiple cars, can fit 2 cars tandem in their driveway, but don't want to because it's very inconvenient to have to maneuver cars around and back one out and let the other in, and want the convenience of being able to leave one car off the street, though they do have room for off-street parking themselves. So that's one
We
of
had
the,
we had a number of examples when the issue came up before and the mayor asked about it. One was people who have long sloping driveways where parking in front of the front door on street is actually better for them than parking off street, particularly in the winter because of mobility issues and ice. People with disabilities who could not get out of their own driveway fast enough, either because of the configuration or because they had a person in the house who really needed to get to the hospital faster than an ambulance could take them there and faster than they could get out of their own driveway. And then I'm always reminded of Boston City Councilor Flaherty, who had 5 cars in one driveway, but liked to park all 5 on the street. So, you know, it's a, however we slice it. I know there are a couple of homes without driveways. And we also approved a lot of multifamilies with not only less than an infinite number of parking spaces per unit, but they're charging per each space separate from the rent. And so then there's also the question of what we implicitly promised the neighbors in approving those buildings and hoping that these buildings would attract people who were going to be car light or car free, when in fact they might come to the city and say, oh, I can park for free on the street all the time and store my car there. So why would I pay to park underground? I can park on the street. Why would I limit myself to the one car I'm paying for? Why wouldn't I have 2? All of those have come up.
Just to follow up, Councillor Downs, I don't question all of those factors or aspects of this, but I just want to disaggregate the questions a little bit. And it does seem to me it would just be useful to know how many residential units, whether you have to pay for it or not, separately from your rent if you're a renter, how many literally don't have the option of parking off street if they wanted to. And then there are still all those issues, but I think it would help us define at least one aspect of the challenge to figure out a system that was equitable and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just
yeah, so I wrote that down as a bullet. I've started a new category in my notes of data that we would like to have. I'm thinking in my mind as you're talking about who we could ask. I think the planning department would be the most likely to have a tool or an understanding, but I genuinely have no idea if that data is available or who might collect it for us. Does anybody else on the screen, especially experienced counselors, have any ideas of who we might ask? Councilor Lipoff?
Well, the planning department may, I think their response is going to be it's impossible. We have close to 30,000 residential units in this city, and to know, you know, which ones have driveways that are wide enough for 2 cars, which ones really need this, I think that's really hard data. It's something I totally, Councilor Block, understand why you'd want it, and I would want it too. I don't think that's going to be possible for us to get.
We did hear from a number of residents in the last session, the last term, that informed us that they did not have off-street parking. And we know that there's an apartment building in Center that was built entirely without parking. Those folks are always petitioning the Ward 6 councilors to get to get an overnight permit for, you know, for less than what they would otherwise be charged on the private market. And and a number of places that were built, that really, where the parking is very inconvenient, which is slightly different. But, at our house, we've in part given up the second car because it's such a pain to shuffle the cars with a tandem driveway.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting data because obviously as we are looking at different solutions, including, for example, a parking permit system, one of the major cons that we've heard again and again from the administration is how much work it would be to enforce it. And if we had some order of magnitude of how many permits we might be talking about, that crystallizes a bit how much work we're talking about and how we might be able to go about it in a palatable way. I don't know. I put it on the list of data we would like to have. Again, I'm not sure if it's something that is easily gatherable or not. But I definitely wrote it down. Anything else on this topic right now? Okay, let me go to Councilor Lucas and then we'll continue from there. Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the previous topic, real quick, assessing might have that information, maybe.
Maybe, I was thinking about that too. I will put that on the list to reach out.
Yeah.
Mr. O'Shaughnessy.
Shaughnessy is a guy who keeps very detailed records of everything. So he'd be a good person to reach out to. But getting back to, I think the original question you asked is, what would our preference be going forward?
I'm first thinking, what are other programs we would possibly add to this matrix of different programs? And once we get to that, then we can start going, do we want to look at permits or time limits or what are these other things? But we can also do from 30,000 feet, we can talk about both what they might, what different kinds we might be looking at, and also both what I would call obstacles and opportunities that each one presents us.
Okay, well, I don't think I can add anything new, but I said it last term, and I've always been a proponent of a permitting system. I mean, we technically do it with leaf blowers, where they have to get the sticker, put it on the van or the truck, and that's how they're monitored. And you could do a similar system. You could put it on the bumper, the rear bumper of a car, and there goes your permit. You're good to park overnight, 2 to 6 from December to March. I've always been like that, so I don't think I can add anything more to your list, Councilor Downs.
I think the issue with the overnight in winter was just that if snow mounds or you get ice, it's kind of hard to find the permit and see the permit, particularly at night. But I hear you. That's been one of the obstacles, has just been how to enforce it, particularly in winter at night. But we're not restricted to an overnight permit. We could do a residential all the time permit similar to Newtonville, where it's 2-hour parking except with the permit. That would in part also reduce the number of additional cars being stored on the street, just because you have the 2-hour limit if you're not a resident with a permit, and the enforcement could happen summer as well as winter.
Yeah, I'm still on the just winter only, but that's me. And I don't think, in my opinion, it would be difficult to enforce. I know we have Captain Devine here, and don't know if he's authorized to speak on behalf of the entire police department. But
he might have thoughts, you're right.
I mean, well, we all have thoughts on parking in Newton. There's about 90,000 people who have opinions on parking, but I don't think it would be difficult to enforce or even costly to enforce. We have parking enforcement officers employed right now, or I think they're called parking enforcement officers.
Parking control officers, and they work during the day.
Yeah, but again, it would not be out of the world, to hire additional ones or use the same ones. And 2 to 6, December through March. I mean, I've done the math. It's approximately 480 hours worth of enforcement. 120 days, give or take, times 4 hours every day. So it's only 480 hours in a year. So that's the enforcement mechanism behind it. And
Maybe they could be
and-
crossing guards in the morning.
and
Get to
crossing
8
guards-
hours.
crossing guards in the morning, and they're already employed. They already have vehicles. They can just, they get their area in Newton, and they drive around, and if they see a car on the street without a neon green or a neon pink sticker on the bumper, ticket. Or they come back in an hour because they're allowed to park for an hour, I believe. But I think that's the best way to go about with the overnight parking ban. And basically what we're talking about. And I'm gonna steal a line from you, Counselor Downs, from the other night, if I hope you don't mind. Let's not make perfect the enemy of good, okay?
Gotcha.
So interesting. I think a lot about a permit system as well. It's always seemed to make the most sense to me. Some of the biggest issues that I see with it are, we don't really know what the range of technological solutions is out there. Counselor Downs, maybe you know more about what is really out there. If there's a purchasable solution that makes it easier to check permits, then I think we would have to dig into the math a little bit more. It's interesting that you mentioned it's 480 hours of enforcement. It seems to me that if we were to create a job out of it, it probably needs to be, well, I suppose it could be a seasonal job, but it probably needs to be a year-round job. I don't know if there are folks who are just available in the winter. It's very interesting to think about combining it with a crossing guard position, because that's certainly a problem that we need to solve, but as we know, is also really wrapped up in negotiation issues with our different labor unions and what's in the realm of the possible there. And then I think it's interesting from a budget perspective to think, is it a self-sustaining program? I mean, do you issue enough tickets that the program pays for itself in terms of people who we're hiring, and what is the budget math there? I suspect there's not a ton of appetite to be adding to the budget, but maybe it's a cost neutral thing. Councilor Lucas, you seem like you wanted to respond to that, and then we have a couple of their hands up.
Yeah, I want to hear from everyone. Just want to respond to the last thing that you said. Would it pay for itself essentially? What you're looking is to break even or come close to breaking even. I don't have this information in front of me right now. We could contact the police department or human resources. Or it's actually in our budget book. What the salary is for a parking enforcement officer, and just go about it that way. We need, for example, 4 enforcement officers every night in Newton, and just come up with your cost of the program that way. And, that would be the best way to calculate it.
Captain Devine, did you want to comment on?
Yeah, I just want to comment on I like the ideas of thinking outside the box. Some of it, as someone mentioned before a second ago, there's a lot of contractual issues with that. They have their union, and that would have to be bargained in. Also too, like much of the rest of the world, we're also dealing with a shortage of workers in all capacities. I think it might be a bit difficult, although I mean I'm not opposed against it, to find someone to work those late hours on whatever basis to do it. We'd have to find someone. I as for the PCOs doing it, it's kind of hard for them to do it. I would say, being someone who spent many years on nights too, it's a young person's type of world to do that. And I think at this stage that it might be harder working those extreme late hours to do that. So just food for thought, though. But I think a lot of it contractual type of stuff has to be bargained in, and just finding people to do it, I think, is probably the two major obstacles.
Okay, thank you. And I would imagine also an overnight shift into the morning would probably command a different salary than the daytime hours that our parking control officers normally work, but I'm not sure about that, having not studied this before. We have a couple other hands up, and Councillor Lipoff, your hand was up. Did you want to chime in on this topic or a different one?
Yes, no, this one, and it's not about the nighttime and I don't, I'm really not for the permitting thing. But I do know, Councilor Grossman, that you've been very concerned, and we have been very concerned about a lack of crossing guards. I've spent a lot of time recently in Brookline, and a crossing guard waved me down because he's an old friend of mine, and he's living in Brookline now, and he loves his job, and his job is crossing the kids twice a day, and in between, he's doing parking enforcement, ticketing. And combining those two have given a better salary and a job that is varied, and he loves it. And I think that we should talk to Brookline and find out how they do that. And I think it's useful even outside this conversation of parking, but for filling these positions that we're finding a hard time to do. So let's put that on the list of things.
I thought we did that, Captain Devine. Oh, he's gone. That was my understanding is what we did here.
Is that what we're doing?
I thought so.
Well, I don't see the same people crossing that are doing that, but if we are, great, but maybe it can be expanded, or people don't know that it's an option. Thank you.
I think some of them do it, but not all of them.
Okay.
We only have 10 PCOs. They get paid a little under 60,000 all in. So 58, 433, 56, 299. I'm looking at the budget book. Something around there, 60,000 for traffic. Yeah. So depending on how long you've been with the force.
Okay. Overall, from a high level, I think that that we could let the citizens decide on the overnight parking thing. Let me just throw that in. I don't like referendums for a lot of complicated things, but this one is pretty straightforward, and I could envision an up or down, and then a neighborhood by neighborhood, street by street, because that's the problem here. We have areas that desperately need to get rid of the overnight parking. There are other areas that it's not as big a concern. And I think we can handle it street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood. But I think they've got the signatures. I think it's going to go. So a lot of our discussion here is interesting, but I think it's going to come off that vote and then pivot. And it's not that I don't want to plan, I just understand that there are streets that people need relief. I think we're adults. We're all adults. I think that if we went to using a blast phone call, everybody, huge storm coming on Tuesday, remember to get your cars off the street. 2 winters like we just had, no phone calls, no trouble, no reason to take your car off the street. I think we need to think about this commonsensically, and I think that we need to pay attention to the areas that need relief and others that don't. When we try to blanket everything, we usually have unintended consequences, but we can fix those. That's what we do on Traffic Council. That's what we do on PSNT. Thank you.
Hey, Councilor Wright, you had been next.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So some of the places that need the parking also don't have the street to accept all this parking. So it's not a really simple thing. The places that don't need it, generally those streets have the room for the parking, but I'm thinking of Nonantum. And then, like I said, then they're going to have to start, banning parking on one side or something like that. The other job sharing is we have a code enforcer that's during, spring, summer, fall type thing. And this could be more of a year round. Yeah, in the winter, it'll be more, the overnight, but then in the summer, it's during the day. Just a thought. But I think we should wait to see what happens with, I mean, it's good to discuss this, but wait to see what happens with the vote, because we may come up with a solution and it won't satisfy whatever the vote came.
So there is a desire on the part of many of our colleagues, or I should say, leaders across the city looking at the vote to come, that feel this discussion now is important, because if we are able to arrive at something more creative, or that can sort of satisfy all parties, that it might essentially render the vote not needed. I mean, at this point, I think it's on the ballot, so it's going to be on the ballot no matter what, but essentially that it shapes the energy and desire of those who really want to see the current ordinance go away, to really go out there and have a significant undertaking leading up to the vote, versus arriving at something that makes people largely across party lines, for lack of a better word, feel good about it. So that's really the point of the docket item, is to see if we can arrive at something, or that said, assuming the vote goes forward, if there's something we come up with that we think is really good for the city policy wise overall, that we've done the research and the work so that it's something that could be considered and implemented right away on the other side of the vote, rather than having that happen and then having a whole, year-long process or more after that to try to solve problems. So that's the point of the conversation. If it's clear that the conversation in committee isn't going anywhere, then that's fine. And eventually we can reach that conclusion and NAM the item and see what happens with the vote and take it from there. But we thought it was worth trying and discussing it, and particularly given that we do have the bandwidth on the committee to try to explore creative ideas and see if we might come up with something good. Councillor Downs and then Councillor Block.
So I want to be really clear about my motivations in putting this on the docket yet again, after having done it twice last term. And that is that I start from the assumption that the vote will go forward, and that we will not have an overnight parking ban. We could, of course, the very next day as a council, vote it back in. I think that, however, realistically, that's just not politically likely. And so rather than being in reactive mode, as Chair Grossman said, I think it's worth our time to spend some time thinking creatively about what might solve some or all of the issues that are identified by supporters of the overnight parking ban without being a winter overnight parking ban. Couple of different things. Captain Devine, you cut out just as Councillor Lipoff was talking about Brookline's PCO program, that also those folks also work as crossing guards. And
Yep.
My impression, and maybe you can answer this, was that Newton already does something very similar.
In what context? And we have about 40 something safety officers, I guess we'll call them, traffic control officers. But I'm not sure what Brookline does though.
So Brookline has their crossing guards also doing parking control in between when they're doing the school crossings.
Okay.
And as I said, my impression was that I believe we have 10, maybe 11 parking control officers on staff.
Yeah.
And that they also double when they're not doing that while they do their parking control stuff, they also will pick up crossing guard shift. Am I wrong with that?
No, yes, we have 10 PCOs. All of them start off their day by doing a school post in the morning. Then they go to doing the enforcement during the day, and then they go back to doing the crossing guard in the afternoon. Then they kind of go back. So they do both.
Right.
There's a handful out of the 10 that on their days off would still be crossing guards. That's their option. They can make a few hours of overtime if they want. Some say yes, some say no, but all 10 do that.
So we are already doing what
Yes.
Brookline is doing, which is what I thought. I got an email from some of our friends in Nonantum during this meeting, noting that one of the issues in their neighborhood is just that the fines for overstaying your your welcome at the, on the hourly parking is only $20, and for some that's a reasonable cost of doing business. I have asked for all of our fines, and I've also asked for the fines from surrounding communities so that I have a sense of, I think you gave that to me. And yeah, so I have all of those. So our maximum fine, except for parking in a commercial vehicle overnight or blocking a curb cut or parking in a handicapped space without a placard, is $20. And it hasn't changed in the entire time I've been on council or the entire time I've been following city council business, which is a little bit longer. So that might be another thing that we might want to look at. And Chair Grossman, you mentioned technology. We could do a permit by plate program. And with license plate readers, then that would help not only with hourly parking, but also with permits and who has a permit and who doesn't. I think one of the permutations of a permit program that I'd want to explore with the committee is if you get a permit, would that only apply in your neighborhood or on your street, or would you be able to park anywhere where there's a permit program? And we need to start to think that through. And I also wanted to respond to Councilor Lipoff and Councilor Wright about blanket solutions versus street by street. One of the things the administration was very clear about last term was that they don't want a complicated system. They want a simple system. We could, though, make it an opt-in system where a neighborhood opts into the permit program and the rest of the city says, like on my streets, they may say, we don't have a problem. Why would we do this?
The vote is up. Could I just respond? The vote is up
Sure.
and down, which is quite simple. And we can probably keep it simple because, as we said, there are areas that would be fine. But there are some that if they really want some kind of relief or a different program would come in front of us. And I don't think that would be, well, I don't know. I don't know how many would come forward. But I don't see it as a micromanaging kind of thing. I see it as if how it's always been with neighbors needing to get signatures, to get together, to make a change. And if it's worthy, it'll happen. So
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I guess my point was we could devise a system that would work from at this level and just sort of, this is what program, this is how it works, this is how much it would cost. That's another thing to think about. And these are the benefits that you get or don't get as part of that. And neighbors come to us and say, we want in on that, or they say, just leave us alone, we're fine the way we are.
I think it'll all flow from the vote. Yeah.
I agree.
Yep. Thanks.
So, Councilor Dance, do you know what the technology for a license plate scanning system costs?
I don't. Maybe Captain Devine does. It, Brookline had it. God, easily 20 years ago, so it's not new technology. It's a camera system. It uploads to the computer. It can tell you right away, among other things. This is a stolen car, or this is a car with an expired registration, that kind of thing as well. The concerns, and I covered this as a reporter in Brookline, were about privacy and holding on to the data and who might have access to it. Brookline built a back-end system to protect that, so that, because they're very serious about civil rights, we could adopt that and modify it ourselves. But if we adopt that technology, it's relatively, I would think, relatively easy administratively to roll out. Again, given union negotiations, but I would think something that makes it a lot easier for you to do, and that would help the city to pay for more parking control officers, for instance,
Well, and
might
my
might
mind-
fly.
Yeah, one of the big issues there is how much would it cost, for example? I mean, I can imagine
Of course.
parking permit that is pretty expensive, that sort of, places a value on the kind of externality of parking a car and driving a car in the city, and helps to pay for the enforcement of it. And one of the other big questions that I've wrestled with around this is, how many permits should somebody be able to buy? What if you
Mhm.
want to park 10 cars in the city of Newton? Should somebody be able to do that? And to your point also, Counselor Downs, if you buy one of these permits, does it mean you can park anywhere? Does it mean you can just leave your car and on another street in a different part of the city entirely, and that's okay? Or are we talking about, within one's own neighborhood? So there are a lot of
Taking-
complicated questions.
I'm
Thanks for
taking
that.
notes on things to think about. I noticed that Captain Devine is unmuted.
Did you want to say something, Captain Devine?
I could take a look into it. I can forward it over to Councilor Downs tomorrow, what the PCOs have. I know they have some kind of things in their handhelds, which kind of take pictures of things. I could find out exactly what we have. We did in the past have the automated license plate readers, which would Brookline kind of had too. They cost, this is like 10 years ago, about 16,000 at that point. So I'm sure it's probably closer to 20,000 for one of those license plate readers. But as mentioned before, there's a lot of issues from the ACLU with that, with the privacy. I mean, there's a lot of good to it where you can help find an elderly party who maybe kind of with Alzheimer's kind of steers away and he's driving a certain car that helps. But obviously there's a lot of issues with that legality wise. But I could find out what we have in the parking control officer's cars, and I'll let you guys know as soon as possible.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I would think the enforcement, in a way, would pay for itself. The question is the administration of the permit program and whether that would pay for itself. Right now, permits are at $25. I'm told don't pay for the administration part, and yet, but I'm, I hear that, and then I hear, oh no, 25 is plenty. It's mostly the guest permits, which are free, that are a money loser. Should expect that would be.
So you're talking about the existing
Our
permit.
existing permit system is $25 a year.
Would it be helpful if at a future meeting we had someone from the administration just review all the existing permit programs we have in the city? Because I think I'm actually a little confused about how many we have.
Sure. David Kozis could
David?
come talk to us.
Point on that one.
What's that, Captain Devine?
David Kosis, he's the point contact on that. He knows that in and out.
Yeah, he's devised all the neighborhood permit programs, some of them to allow for on-street parking for teachers in residential areas, some for employees in at least 3 village centers, some for the high school permit program around in North.
Okay, yeah, that seems to me to be a useful thing to review.
Data point, I'll put it down as one of our data points.
People agree with that? Okay. Counselor Block and then Counselor Wright.
Well, this discussion has reminded me about a whole bunch of things that some we've talked about before and some we haven't. One sort of 30,000 foot comment. We've talked and taken some action to discourage car use in this city, allowing developments to be built without parking, and or to limit the number of parking stalls per unit. And if the overnight parking ban is lifted and people can park, let's just forget all the permutations about permits aside for the moment. But if the overnight parking ban is lifted, then it seems to me whatever efforts we've made in the direction to encourage people to not own cars or to go car light, quote unquote, that's undermined. Now I'm not sure how effective this, I'll call it a policy. I'm not sure we've really adopted as a policy, but this direction that we've followed, I'm not sure how effective it is, but if we really hope to pursue this, then I think that it's hard to see how lifting the parking ban helps us. It feels to me like it hurts us. Maybe I'm not thinking it through clearly enough, but people can just park anywhere, anytime, or maybe they have a citywide permit or some local permit system, then it's no big deal that a parking stall doesn't come with your unit, or only one comes, and it's not unusual for a family maybe at one time to need one car, and then a couple of years later they need a second car, and instead of it being a problem, it's a non-problem. You just park on the street.
Right.
So where is this policy direction that I hear about? Again, I'm not sure where I stand on it, but this city has taken specific actions in that direction. And why would we bother? Now I don't know that the parking ban is going to be lifted, but I think we just ought to try and think about that. If we really want that policy, then that ought to be one of the assumptions or one of the goals that we think about as we try and figure out what the best way forward is. I guess related to that is the vote. I personally do not think it's a foregone conclusion that the parking ban will be lifted. I really don't know what the vote will be. I've heard some people say, well, of course it'll pass overwhelmingly, because why not? But I'm just not sure. Maybe there will be other factors in the debate that come forward, and I hope that we spend some time thinking about what do we do under the current system, in part to if we decided we wanted as a policy to retain some overnight parking ban for various reasons. Maybe one reason would be the direction of this car discouragement policy. Then how do we do that? That's one of the reasons I was drawn to this discussion. Let's see if some of the issues that the proponents of removing the parking ban advocate, let's see if we could address some of those. And to me, the biggest one is the equity issue. I mean, there may be others, but for homeowners, such as the one on Edinburgh Street, who just do not have off-street parking, how can we help them? And what system could we develop to do that? And that gets back to my question about, well, how many situations like that are there? And maybe we can find that out. And maybe we just have to estimate it by doing a sort of sample. You know, let's go visit every 10th street and see how many such houses there are and just get a rough idea about what we're talking about. So
you're thinking of like a waiver system.
Well, the way I was thinking about it was a permit system. I mean, whether you want to call it a waiver or not. And when I'd done a little bit of research before our last discussion, Norwood has a pretty simple system for issuing permits to houses that don't have off-street parking. You can get one, and I don't know, you place a call, you fill out a really simple form, police officer goes out and verifies that, yeah, you don't have off-street parking, and you get one permit. And I don't know if it costs anything. But you don't get two, and you don't get 10, you get one. And it's designed to make sure everybody has at least one access to one vehicle, you know, in front of their house, in front of their door. And I don't know how many towns or cities have developed that kind of process, but at least Norwood has. So I think there was one other thought I had, but those are the two main things. I think it is that sort of a question for you, Chair Grossman. Maybe we should divide our analysis, that there really should be some of us who work on, let's assume this overnight parking ban is lifted. I mean, it certainly could happen. What should we want to do as a city under that circumstance? And others are working on, what do we, not so much to prevent the listing, but how do we address some of the concerns that people have raised that are motivating them to want to lift the parking ban? And we can do both. I mean, they're each different, but I think it's sometimes a little confusing. You know, there are all of these different aspects to this, and I'd like to disaggregate them a little bit, and one or two people work on one thing and some other people work on another thing, and maybe some non-committee members are invited to pitch in if we need more people power to kind of work on stuff. Let's sort of organize ourselves a little bit so we can get some sort of more fleshed out proposals that we can all kind of chew on. So those are my thoughts at the moment.
So you said so much that I want to react to. So let me start with where you ended, which is how to organize our work. And there have been a lot of different comments about how we organize our work vis-a-vis how the vote goes and how it doesn't go. Part of the reason that we docketed this second item and didn't just go with the first item that Councillor Downs docketed a couple months back was that in talking to the law department, we have been really careful in making sure this is an overall discussion around what is the ideal parking policy for the city. Obviously, we all know there's a certain outcome that we're going to get one way or another when this vote happens that does give context to what we would do, but so that we're not aiming policy at sort of knocking out the citizens' ballot question and what they put on there. So I just think it might be, rather than saying some of us work on what happens if the vote is yes, what happens if the vote is no, maybe saying some of us work on fleshing out what a permit system would be. Some of us work on fleshing out what a summer ban would be. Some of us work on fleshing out what if there was, no law on the books at all, what other sort of more micro measures might we take? But I do think we need some volunteers to head up some of these different topics because it is going to require some research and work. And I'm almost imagining people coming back and, almost imagine like making your final presentation in class when you come up and say, and here's my proposal, and, making your pitch for the one thing, whether or not it's where you even end up coming out, but essentially so that, because I do think we're going to have to organize and disaggregate this, no doubt.
Just to respond to what you're telling us, the law department has advised. Let me rephrase what I said just slightly, which is that we should explore as a matter of policy what our parking system should be if there's no overnight parking ban. That we could choose to lift that without any vote by the citizens. So sure, that should definitely be one of the options that we consider, and it's not meant to derail a vote or not. It's just what's a good idea for how this city should work.
Right, that's totally the goal. Now to respond to some of your other points quickly, and then I know we have some other hands too. Your initial point about how we have made a lot of decisions that go in the direction of discouraging car use is something that has really bothered me over the last couple terms. I have been very supportive of housing opportunities and building housing. It's really bothered me when, at the next meeting, when in one meeting we're talking about how we're going to reduce the number of off-street parking spaces in a development, and in the next meeting we're saying, but let's allow anybody to park anywhere they want. Like, those two ideas do not square in my mind and never have. It's also interesting how we think about the word equity. I understand people, I understand why it's an equity issue in terms of having access to parking or not. I think the other thing I wrestle with is, Councilor Lipoff could tell me this better than anybody, but those who have off-street parking in their residences have paid for that in the value of their home. And to me, it shouldn't just be free to park your car anywhere. There's a value to that. And, of course, it's not equitable that some people live in giant houses and other people don't. And there's all other types of inequities wrapped up in this. But I'm struggling a little bit with that term and what it means in the context of this conversation. Councilor Wright.
That sounds like we might need a committee just on that topic.
Yeah. So I was going to bring that up. I have rentals. I have some with parking, some without parking. The ones without parking, the rents are lower. The ones with parking, the rents are higher. And the same would be for condos, and so you're going to drop out that bottom. Not totally drop out, but I expect that rents and prices will rise on the bottom tier if you allow parking on the street, just from what it is now, because that's just my experience as it is. I have a question. I've been getting some emails during the meeting here. I have a question for Captain Devine. This person told me that, and this is in Nonantum, and there was, parking issues and a car, blocking an area and stuff, and they called the police, and the police said that they could not have the car towed and only ticketed. Is that true or not?
I'm not sure what the context is. We can tow cars. What was the situation for that case?
There's a problem. I called an officer because there's a car parked on the corner that was not allowed, and the officer told me they cannot tow cars. That's all I have.
I mean, we can tow. There's kind of that's in the middle. We could tow cars. We just can't tow cars for everything unless it's like a real safety issue. If there's a safety issue, the officer responds and call down the sergeant and say, "Listen, this is why we got to tow this car." then they could do it. But other than that, we can ticket it. So basically, it's officer's discretion that if the car is parked too close to the corner, causing a problem, we'll ticket it. If it's a safety issue where someone's going to get really hurt, then we can tow it.
Okay. Is there anything that, especially if we do one of these parking and you're parking on one side versus the other side, can we get more aggressive on the towing? I live over here in West Newton, the CVS parking lot, and the tow company sits in the lot and watch people walk over to, you know, over to the post office, and then they go and tow them. I mean, they're a little too aggressive, but
I mean, the thing with that, that's a private lot hired by the company. They see that person, it might be CVS lot, kind of go across the street to the movie theater. They're gonna tow it. They'll call us, let us know it's towed. But that's all private property, and that's a whole different thing from a municipal lot.
okay. But I mean, on the street, if people are not, so normally is you just give tickets, and what I've been reading and you know, residents are telling me the $20 for a lot of people, they just don't care.
Yeah. But we do have a thing called tow and holds. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. So if person A, or actually it's vehicle A, if vehicle A gets caught on the street, but the PCOs, they have the machine, when they're typing in that vehicle, they issue a ticket for, we'll just say parking too close to the corner, whatever the violation is. If that vehicle owes, I think it's, I forget the amount is like over 310 plus tickets, they'll call a tow and hold. So they'll call an officer down there to come down, and that's an automatic tow. So we do have it just once the tickets start adding up to a certain amount and a certain number of tickets.
Okay.
To $310 or 310 tickets?
I don't know what I can find. Again, I can find the amount of tickets and money, but there is a magical number on cost of how much it is. I think it's over $250. I can maybe find that out during a break. And I think it's a number of tickets too, can get a vehicle on a tow and hold. But the thing is, working overnights, if this is an overnight issue, it's only the PCOs that have that handheld machine that will be able to pick up, oh, that vehicle's been doing this for 10 straight nights and they have 10 different tickets. So it's the PCOs entering into a machine. When an officer works on an overnight and they're going to ticket a car for overnight parking violation, they're just using a ticket book. So we don't have that capability with that.
They're using a paper ticket book.
Yeah. That's what the officers use.
How many, if you would need electronic, how many of those handhelds would you need?
There's 9 different divisions at night. So probably at least 9. I mean, I could step away. I can call someone who kind of works with the tickets. I can find that answer out for you in a second, but at least we have 9 different sectors at night.
Because I think that would help in any parking violations in general, if people start getting towed and things like that, because it sounds like you don't have a lot of that data. You're writing just paper tickets.
Yeah, again, if we have it on machines, again, it might be not targeting the same people, but usually if someone has a problem with parking in their lack of driveway on Wednesday, it's going to be on the same thing on Thursday. So they're incurring a lot of tickets over the course of a few months. So I don't know if it's targeting certain people, but again, it's the equitability issue there too, that the same people get ticketed every night just because they don't have the driveway.
Right. Though, I mean, I don't know how to couch this in exactly the right terms, so forgive me if I don't say it exactly right. But one could certainly argue if you're ticketed $20 a night for parking overnight, that's a bargain.
Yeah.
You can park every night.
$5 up to a few years ago. Now it's up to, I think it's up to 25 for every car. Okay.
And to me, that's way less of a cost than what the cost should be to be parking on street. But I guess I have to sit there and think about what the tipping point is of how many nights you'd have to get ticketed. I mean, I don't believe the same cars are getting ticketed every night anyway, just based on my experience with.
Yeah, overnight parking is $25 for any car. About 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, it used to be 25 for just a commercial vehicle and 5 for your average like resident type of violation, but now it's 25 for everyone. A commercial motor vehicle can't park on the city streets all year long, even during the non-winter months too. So they can be ticketed like a commercial. So so-and-so's plumbing company or so-and-so's landscaping company parked on the street, even though maybe April, or June, where it's not within the months, they still could be ticketed for overnight parking.
Right, those also destroy the streets more. So that is a possible data point to collect is, what do parking violations cost and how do they compare with other cities in the area? And when we're talking about a permit program, we need to talk about what the cost of the permit program would be. And the questions about equity will continue to come up because some people can afford the fees and some people are going to find it harder to do. Right. So but parking is a little bit, Jake Auchincloss used to say, like an iron triangle. You can have 2 points, but not all three. It's either available, convenient, or affordable. Those are the three. You can have 2 of them, but not all 3. And I believe that one of the other points of caution to Councillor Black's points and what you were saying, Chair, was that any changes we make to the current overnight parking ban, winter overnight parking ban, would be overturned as part of the vote when the vote comes up, if the vote is successful. If the
Right,
referendum is
the
successful.
only action, as I understand it, that we could take before that would essentially sort of take precedence over the vote is if we got rid of it altogether. So if this committee said, we're going to remove the current ordinance from the books, then that would render the ballot measure moot. And my understanding is it would then not go forward on the ballot. Anything other than that, the vote would still go forward. I don't know if it would preempt though. I mean, are you essentially saying that if we passed a parking permit program next month and then we had this vote, that would render our action?
No, I'm thinking that if we create a waiver program as part of the current overnight parking ordinance, that would also be overturned with the ordinance. That's what I understood the law department to be saying to us, is said you can create a whole nother program and substitute it, and a whole nother ordinance and substitute it for what we have, or layer it in, as an additional option. But because overturning the overnight parking ban will not change, like the Newton North High School permit system or the employee permit system in Newton Center, which are currently operating and are under different ordinance numbers. But any changes we make to the overnight winter parking ban would be overturned with the overnight parking ban. And that was their caution to us about making changes to it, as well as what you mentioned, that, having this discussion of how can we get rid of this vote becomes legally problematic.
Well, and
But-
to be fair in representing their point of view, I think they essentially said anything other than us removing the ordinance from the books, they would have to analyze at that point what the legal effect of our action is. And they were sort of not prepared to pre-promise what the interaction of our action and the vote would be without more specifics of what we may get serious about.
It-
Councilor Clark, did you want to add?
If we adopted a waiver plan or a permit plan and the overnight parking ban was lifted as a result of the vote, well, then the permit system that we would have created would be moot. So, I mean, whether it gets overturned by the vote or whether it becomes moot, I'm not sure it really matters. People wouldn't need it. So we would just probably repeal it, or maybe it gets repealed anyway. I mean, I'm not sure it really matters. There might be some things that, well, the simplest issue to me is those units that just don't have off-street parking And if we had a system for them, such as what Norwood has, that would go away because it wouldn't be needed if the overnight parking ban was lifted. They could park in front of their unit without any permit. So I don't know if I'm missing something else that maybe law, the law. legal
No, I
department-
just don't think it's clear, like, if we had a permit system that said anyone who doesn't have off-street parking can purchase a permit, you know, for some amount of money and be permitted to park their car year-round on the street of their residence. I don't think it's crystal clear if that would be rendered moot by the overnight parking ban or not. I'm sort of thinking through it in my head in a tangled way. I think we would need to see how serious we are about any of these systems being desirable and realistic, and then analyze with the law department what effect that would have if it were voted in before the vote, and what effect it would have if it were voted in after the vote.
Okay,
That's I think as we get, I think if we crystallize certain ideas, that'll become more obvious, but it's not going to be obvious till we get further down the line. Captain Devine and then Councilor Wright.
I just want to go back to, I have some answers for you regarding before. We could tow when there's a minimum of 10 tickets and a minimum of $200. So that's kind of the magic number on the tow and hold. We
have to have
don't,
both of those things or one or the other.
both of them.
And you have to, so $200 outstanding or $200 charged
Yeah.
ever.
And a minimum 200 outstanding that is owed to the city for parking fines. And it has to be a minimum of 10 tickets too.
So let's say you get ticketed every day and you pay the next morning.
Then it just clears it out again. So you can get ticketed 200 days a year if you're that parking every day, maybe working in Newton Corner or something like that. We also don't tow on Fridays, and we don't tow after 3. Anytime they have a tow and hold, they call the traffic bureau. Traffic bureau then calls the Treasury, the City Hall, just to verify, because those machines can make mistakes, which is what we try to avoid. Once it's verified by City Hall, which is why there's a time restriction, that's when we send an officer down there to tow the vehicle. So just give you a little bit more of a full play out on a tow and hold.
So hold on, City Hall, what information does City Hall verify?
All right, so what happens is a PCO will call Traffic Bureau and say, listen, so Dan, I have a tow and hold here down at this street. It's on this plate. We'll run that plate, and they'll say, oh yeah, it looks like they owe about 12 tickets for $300. We call City Hall to verify it, because sometimes the PCO's machine or even our machine is either outdated or hasn't got the new payments in. Once City Hall validates it, then we send an officer down there to tow it.
Got it. Where does it get towed to?
Toadies. Everything we do
Oh,
is toadies.
okay. Thank you. Councilor Wright.
So that's not a lot of cars because I live by Toadies. There's some cars there, but not a ton. Anyways, one of the things, I mean, two of the big organizers for to remove the parking ban do have driveways. So having a permit system for people who don't have driveways, I don't think will satisfy them at all. They have more cars than driveway space.
Right.
Well,
I agree.
That may be true for some people, but it might not be true for others. I just don't know how this will break. Pam.
I mean, it's also always interesting, of course, you know, how it goes is determined in large part by who shows up as well. And
It's going to be a mayor race though, too.
that's true. That's true.
So I think there'll be a lot
Okay,
of people.
Captain Devine, did you have more you wanted to say? No? Okay. So we have a lot of good ideas out here, and Councilor Downs has started sketching out a chart to organize us. Let me ask right now.
I'll send that to everyone via email.
And let's attach it to the report.
Absolutely.
So we make sure that it's out there publicly. I'm thinking back to Counselor Block's comment about how we get organized from here. I think we need some volunteers to take on to lead up some of these different possibilities and try to conduct some research. I think largely we want to do it out of this committee. There certainly may be very motivated colleagues of ours in other committees who want to contribute, which is also totally fine. It's obviously just tougher because we have the scheduling issue, although Ms. Delaney and I were emailing a little bit, just looking at the schedule in late June. We're not going to have a meeting on the 19th because of the Juneteenth holiday. So we could schedule a meeting at the end of the month on a night where the 3Ps are otherwise not meeting. And maybe that would be a nice opportunity to put Counselor Downs' chart up on the screen, see what we're missing, see if there are other ideas out there, and see if other colleagues want to kind of head up anything. Is there anybody right now who is really motivated and interested in taking on any one of these concepts and trying to flesh it out? Otherwise, I see us doing it live in these meetings.
Well, I started to explore which communities have a permit system that exempts people from complying with an overnight parking ban. I think that's something we ought to know more about. That will involve contacting a fair number of towns, and maybe there are other questions we would want to pose in a standardized way just to collect information. I don't want to make this more complicated than it already is, but I certainly don't mind working on that either on my own or with somebody else who wants to sort of develop the standardized questions, which I think are pretty straightforward, and then to split up the communities and call them. Just, eventually you'll track down the person in the police department or in the clerk's office who's, informed enough to answer the questions and whatever problems they've encountered or not.
Okay, that's super helpful, and I really appreciate that. Counselor Lucas.
Thank you. So my thing was the permitting system, and I kind of gave everyone a slight sneak preview on what the challenges would be, particularly the costs. If you want me to, I could email inspectional services to see how much they charge, or what their cost is, I should say, for the sticker that goes on the landscaping trucks. And then with respect to the personnel for enforcement, I could the information is in our budget books. I think Counselor Downs already said how much they make either annually or by the hour. I can't remember which one it was, but I could come up with some cost table to see what a permitting program would cost the city, if that's what you were looking into.
Well, I think the latter one for sure is data that we need. I think on the former point, and Counselor Downs, I know you and I have talked about this before, but when it comes to the topic of parking, I don't think we're beholden to the concept that we can only charge what it costs us to administer it. I think we have pretty free reign at arriving at what an appropriate cost is. Is that right?
That is accurate, yes.
And I imagine a number that is, personally, I imagine a number that's pretty far north of what we charge for the permit system for our landscapers. Others certainly may have different views in mind, but I think if you're gonna store your car on the street in the city, you should really want to and really have to pay for it personally. Counselor
And
Wright. I'm
That would
sorry.
have to be a conversation that we have with finance anyway. And we'd have to have the research on what would bring a lot of cars onto the street and what wouldn't. We might even have to have a pilot to understand that.
The landscaping fee is not, it's more to get the landscapers to be registered and know our rules. And then there's penalties that are assessed, which I think are $100. And it can go to the homeowner and the company if they're not using a registered landscaper. So the actual fee to register it, it's more, just the paperwork to get them to register, but that they know the rules and follow our rules.
So it's interesting. I'm hearing still the most interest in some sort of permit direction. I'm wondering, Counselor Block, because you talked about identifying a list of questions. Maybe as an initial task, do you want to take a stab at outlining the questions? And I mean, I think we could probably each take the action item of calling a few communities and trying to ask the questions and report back, if that makes sense.
Sure, I was thinking as we were talking about this, asking towns how much, well, at very least, if they have a parking permitting system, and what do they charge? I mean, all the nuances could be pretty detailed, and I'm not sure we're ready for the nuances of what one town versus another. I mean, we already have a fair number of parking permit systems in Newton, and I don't know what they cost. I don't happen to have one in my neighborhood, but with all of the discussions about Riverside, for example, have included the assumption that Lower Falls will end up with a parking system to discourage overflow parking in our neighborhood of people who would, rather not pay for whatever the parking is at Riverside and walk, say, half a mile. So, but I'm happy to put together a list of questions that occur to me that if I or anybody is calling a town, let's just try and collect some standardized information. But maybe anybody who has a particular idea about what they want collected, just send it to me and I'll add it to the list, and then I'll ship it around to everybody.
What does everybody think about meeting the last week of June so that we have an opportunity when the rest of the council isn't meeting to go over the chart that Counselor Downs is fleshing out, the initial list of questions Counselor Block is putting together, and then I can also reach out to Mr. Kozis and see if he's available whatever night we land on, to see if he can review the current parking permit programs, where they exist and what they cost. Does that sound like a good next step?
I could do that, just the 26th is not feasible, but Wednesday or Thursday, and certainly Friday, but the 24th, the Monday or Tuesday of that week.
Counselor Downs, you said the 26th you couldn't do. That is a Wednesday.
Right, that's the one I could not do.
But okay, all right.
I could do I don't think we have land use on the 25th, and we don't believe we have council on the 24th, so.
That's right.
We don't have council on the 24th?
No, 17th.
Hello?
Yep, Ms. Delaney?
Yes, you have city council on the 24th.
We do on the
No,
24th?
Oh, no,
Mark said it was the
sorry.
17th.
Sorry, the 17th.
We have it on the
After his meeting,
17th.
yep.
And
Is
we have a
Is
chairs
there
meeting at
finance on the
6:30.
24th?
Finance and ZAP on the 24th.
Yes.
What about
25th.
the 25th?
25th is a Tuesday. Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday are available that week.
So do you want me to look into the 25th as a possibility?
So
Does
there's
anybody,
there's no land use on the 25th, is that right?
Correct, correct.
Okay.
what does everyone think of the 25th? Okay, why don't you all pencil that in, okay? And I've been around long enough to know that when you think a date looks great, you find out later that there's a problem. So let's pencil that in as a possible time to discuss this. Obviously, I know we have the summer coming up, and generally we certainly don't want to take any serious action over the summer when people are away, but I think we can continue brainstorming and working and generating ideas, and then trying to identify appropriate times for public comment as well. Because we often get great ideas from our residents, and we certainly want to give them an opportunity to identify what they're thinking about. Councillor Bixby, did I see your hand up at one point? Did you want to say something? No. Okay.
I was just you had said that you would include Mr. Kozis's presentation in that meeting, and I just knowing the history of some of these parking permit areas and the reasons that they were put in place and the sort of lower prices that they have at the moment, because they were intended to make the business districts, employees and that kind of thing happen. I think it's just an important, knowing the history of those things will be an important piece of the puzzle. But so I think that'd be great if that happens that same night, or we can get it to happen before some of these next conversations.
Yeah, I'll ask him. I don't know what his availability
Right.
is like, and I imagine he could speak to this stuff pretty easily, but I don't know if it requires him to do any preparation work either. Councillor Block?
I just wanted to suggest that while this is on our minds, that you get questions, either data elements that you think we need to collect from other towns, or specific questions, get them to me by Friday, and I'll sort of sort through and try and organize it and add my own and ship it back to everybody. So
I'll send out this chart as well, and that should help a little with organizing the work. And I encourage everyone to add your own layers in there before, your own notes. We should probably talk about them publicly rather than circulate them as a sheet without there being fully public. But you can certainly make your own notes and bring them into our next meeting about what you're thinking about.
Right. Given that we are obviously working with a public docket item, we need to be careful that we're, sharing publicly and not just amongst the committee, anything that might constitute deliberations. But I think people could, if people individually were to send suggestions to Councillor Block, or if there's something that belongs on Councillor Down's chart that's not there, I think you could probably send that individually, just not to the whole committee recirculated without posting that publicly.
Right, we would have to put it as part of the report and then put it as part of the agenda. You were asking about pieces of data that we're willing to do. I am currently looking at the cost of meters in other neighboring communities, as well as the cost of tickets. It's probably time for us to look at those anyway. And then we should probably have a larger discussion, if we do permits, about the cost of those permits, as well as the cost of the program, as Councillor Lucas has noted.
Okay, thank you. And we have been joined by Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kelly, I know you were at another meeting. We were brainstorming different kinds of ideas that would be ideal parking policy and trying to get ourselves organized about how to approach the problem. Councillor Downs is working on putting the various possibilities in a chart that we can include in our report to go over at our next discussion on this topic and look at what we might be missing. Councillor Block is compiling data we would be interested in knowing from other communities about how they approach this problem so that we can divide up who's going to call different communities and try to report back to each other about what we've learned. And we were looking at Tuesday, June 25th, when we understand you're not having a land use meeting as a potential night to meet again, since we are not meeting on Juneteenth and 19th, to give counselors who are on other committees an opportunity to come in and talk about this issue. Anything you want to add before we?
No, I caught all that despite my late arrival. We just got out of PF. I thank you for your little synopsis there, Becky. That was exactly what I heard. And you're right. Land use is not meeting on the 25th. So I planned another social dinner with friends that night. So I will probably not be able to join you, but you were, thank you so much for accommodating the schedule that way. And I am looking forward to the work that this committee does and interested in where it goes forward. So thank you. And I'm glad I'm able to come in even at the end of it.
Got it. Maybe what I'm going to speak to Clerk Delaney and maybe Miss Moore as well. It might make sense to do a quick doodle poll or something of the council and just find out who is available. Because I think you guys all know, I hesitate to put extra meetings on our schedule outside of regularly scheduled times without a really good reason. So I want to make sure that if we are going to have a meeting on an off night to accommodate the rest of the council, that people can come. Otherwise.
I'm not available. Just know that I have a conflict, but don't stop it for me.
Okay. So maybe it does make sense to do a quick doodle or something and just find out before we put that on the schedule. Any other comments or questions right now? Okay. Seeing none, why don't I ask for a motion to hold? We'll look at the schedule about this proposed next meeting and then let everybody know what we're going to do from a scheduling perspective. And otherwise, I think we all have the directions we're going from here right now. Is there a motion to hold?
Sure. Motion to hold.
Okay. Motion by Councillor Block. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of hold, please say aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thanks for the thoughtful discussion, everyone. I think it's really interesting to hear everybody's perspectives and try to think about the most advantageous way forward for our residents in the city to handle this. So thanks very much, and we'll see you all very soon.
Thanks, everyone.